Hello, I'm Femi OK. You're watching the home edition of the stream under the stairs in my house because it is 2020. We are in a global pandemic. We have learned so much over the past few months about COVID-19. So here on the stream, we wanted to bring together some health professionals who could tell us what do we know now that we didn't know before, talk about vaccines because they're making headlines right now, and what to expect in 2021. I know you have questions. We are here for you. You can jump into the comment section of YouTube, ask your questions, and they can be part of today's show. Oh, we have doctors in the house. We have medical professionals in the house. It's so good to have you back. Ahmed, can you do your official introduction to the world? Tell everybody who you are. Remind the stream viewers who may have seen you before.
Thank you for having me on the show today. My name's Ahmed. I'm a doctor. I work in intensive care and emergency medicine, but I'm also a journalist, and I've written quite a few pieces recently on the economic impact of coronavirus on the world.
Good to have you back. Akiko, really nice to see you. Can you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them who you are, what you do.
Thank you for having me on your show. My name is Akiko Iwasaki. I'm a professor of immunology at the Yale University School of Medicine. My lab studies the immune response to COVID-19.
And another doctor, we have Krishna, also with us on the stream. Krishna, introduce yourself to our global audience. Tell them what you do.
Good to be with you. I'm Krishna Udaikumar. I'm a physician based at Duke University and have the pleasure of leading the Global Health Innovation Center here at Duke, where we try to harness innovation to address health and healthcare challenges, including COVID.
Welcome, everybody. None of you would have missed the headlines recently about vaccines. And so I want to show our audience the 3 vaccines that are making news right now and why they're making news. So let's start with the Pfizer one. 95% efficacy, $40 is the expected price of it. So that's the Pfizer one. Moderna, 94.5% efficacy. And it may cost somewhere between $25 and $37. And then finally, AstraZeneca, up to 90% efficacy, $3 maximum cost. This one is way, way, way cheaper. Ahmed, out of those 3, which one would you pick and why?
I think it's a really difficult question to answer, particularly in terms of the data that's available at the moment. Not a lot of it has been provided towards us, but it's important to also look at the history of drug companies in terms of how they've actually impacted economies before. So in 2017, for example, Pfizer was voted as the least reputable pharmaceutical company of the big companies out there. And they've had quite a lot of fraud complaints. So in 2009, they had the biggest litigation against them. So there are times where drug companies, especially in something that's so marketable, so I guess economically beneficial for a company where the whole world requires a coronavirus vaccine, for them to maybe cut corners or try to jump certain shortcuts. So for me to say which one am I going to trust now, it's difficult to answer that question. It's more of let's wait for the data to come out before we can fully start to say which one of those 3 is the one that's the most exciting.
Akiko, just looking at these 3, can you tell us the difference between the Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca? Because at some point, either in the next few months or the next 6 months, people are going to be faced with a choice. Maybe they won't have a choice. Maybe they just have to take one of them. What's the difference between Pfizer, for instance, the Pfizer vaccine? What should we know about that one?
So the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines are the mRNA vaccines. What that means is it's taking the blueprint to make a protein called the spike protein, which is the target of the immune response to SARS coronavirus 2, which causes the COVID-19 disease. And that's introduced into the cell by a lipid capsule. And it's our own cells that make the proteins, the spike proteins, that become the target of antibodies and T cells. The AstraZeneca vaccine is a viral vectored vaccine, which means that we're using the adenovirus as a Trojan horse to deliver the material inside the cell. And again, it's the host cell that makes the protein, the spike protein, that becomes the target of antibodies and T cells. So all of these things are, have a very high efficacy so far, and I'm very excited about them.
Let me just go to Abdurrahman Abdi. And Abdurrahman on YouTube says, whose duty is it to conduct random independent tests of the components of the vaccines? Because he's really concerned about transparency. Who is, that's something that you said, Ahmed, you're like, I want to check the data, make sure it's okay. Whose responsibility is it to do that?
Well, I guess it's part of the whole process of peer review research, where normally in something that's not so rushed, where a drug company is trying to produce a product, they'll go through various phases of research and submit it to different journals where other people who are peers of who work in the same field will go through the research and the data, and then come to a conclusion whether or not they think this is feasible or not feasible, and it goes through various stages. So there is always background checks that can happen, but in this, I guess, more of a rushed process, there are corners that are being cut, even when it comes towards the FDA or NICE in the UK. There are because they're looking for emergency approval.
What are the corners?
There isn't going to go through as much scrutiny.
What are the corners? Akiko, do you agree that the corners, you're sitting there with excitement, and Ahmed is saying that they're cutting corners?
Well, I'm not sure what corners are being cut. I mean, certainly the phase 3 trials are looking at safety and making sure that no adverse events are happening. And so far, none of these 3 companies have adverse event that would stop it from going forward. And obviously the efficacy data, these are called press releases, which means that the companies that are conducting the trials are putting out news in the form of press release, as opposed to what Ahmed wants to see, which is the peer-reviewed or at least preprint version of the raw data. And now we haven't seen those yet, but I believe those are forthcoming.
All right. Oh,
Yeah.
this is a scary
agree.
time. I shouldn't be projecting scary time at you, viewers around the world. But we don't know enough, do we, Krishna?
Well, we don't know enough, and we are living through a real crisis around the world. And so I agree that the data is incredibly important, but there's a strong role here for regulatory bodies as well, in addition to the peer review process. And so we have seen the FDA and other regulators also step up and make sure that they're providing transparency as well as clear guidelines as to what they want to see from the data, including efficacy as well as safety. And maybe to go back to your first question, what excites me about vaccine developments is really all of the above. I don't think we can be in a position where we try to choose just one of these 3 candidates or even more that are coming online. We know that in the best case scenario where all 3 of these vaccines are seen to be effective and get approved, that the total manufacturing capacity is about 5 billion doses by the end of 2021, so more than a year from now. And more than 3 billion of those doses are already purchased and spoken for. So we're going to have significant shortages. And what we really need to be thinking about is portfolio management. So how many different vaccines can we bring online, how quickly, and make sure that the right type of vaccine is going to the right place at the right time.
Krishna, you tweeted that out just a few hours ago, so I can see this beautifully here on my laptop about how many doses will be available in 2020, 2021, how many have already been bought up. So we're looking by next year at about, I'm just going to count very quickly, 1 to 4 billion doses. That's me just very quick, some quick mathematics. Krishna, I have a question for you. This question comes from Uganda, and this is Winifred. Have a listen.
When you look at Uganda, for instance, what will it take for us to get the right doses required to combat this pandemic in the country? How are we going to ensure global access to an equitable vaccine? Look at the Pfizer vaccine. You need 70-degree freezers for this vaccine to be stored, and most of our health facilities do not have such freezers. How are we going to address that kind of problem? Because we need to ensure that people who require this vaccine access it.
Yeah, thank you, Winifred. I think that's a really critical question. And I would say we have platforms like COVAX, so the World Health Organization, Gavi, and CEPI have come together to really bring together a single platform to try to facilitate equitable access around the world. It's
And these are very
under-resourced at the
well-known
moment.
organizations within the medical world who provide vaccines for affordable prices or actually even free. Krishna, go ahead.
That's right. And so there is room there certainly for improvement. We need tens of billions of dollars more to be raised in this equitable way. And the idea that we might need ultra cold chain in places that are outside of cities, especially in low resource settings, are going to be very difficult, which is why getting the positive data on the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, as well as some of the others that are in the late stage of pipeline, is going to be really important. And in addition to COVAX, I think we're starting to see things like the African Union and the Africa CDC come together to procure funding from across the continent so that they too can make purchases to cover their own population. So we are starting to see some movement, but a long way to go.
Kiko, I feel, and I'm picking up from our online community, some hesitancy about taking the vaccine. This is Shortsy100 on YouTube. Hi, Shortsy. I want to take the vaccine, but part of me is worried about its safety, but mostly because other people have fears, though I don't know why. Okay, so that's all of us projecting our fears, our concern. But we also tracked down Robin, who is in South Africa. She's in Johannesburg, and she's been taking part in the Oxford University trials. And she has a very different perspective regarding taking a vaccine. Here's Robin.
I chose to take part in the South African Oxford vaccine trial for the COVID-19 virus because I think it's incredibly important to have data that is relevant to my local context. I also would like to believe that my taking part would in some way, shape or form enable the people of my country to have access to the vaccine when it's finally approved. In terms of whether I will trust the vaccine when it is available, absolutely. And I think partially this is informed by the fact that having been on the trial, I've been able to witness firsthand the different safety measures and precautions that they've taken to ensure that it's safe and effective.
Akiko, pick up on that.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this fear comes from the fact that the mRNA vaccines, for example, is a new platform, that it has not been approved for any other infectious diseases yet. However, there's very little to fear about any of these vaccines, as I mentioned. The safety is number one, and through the trial, people are really paying attention to what kind of side effect they might have or what kind of adverse events that these volunteers that are taking the vaccine might suffer from. And so far, we have seen no severe concerns from any of these vaccines. And secondly, the mRNA vaccine, essentially what we're doing is we're just sort of telling the cells to make the virus protein that otherwise you would make upon exposure to the virus. So sort of giving us a leg up first to produce our own antibody before being exposed to the virus gives us the ability to block and neutralize and really help us from getting severe diseases. So I would be the first one to line up to get the vaccine if any of these things are approved.
Mm-hmm. So I asked Ahmed which one would he pick, which one would he choose. I'd be tempted to do the 95% one, efficacy. Which one would you pick if you had a choice?
Like I said, it's more complicated than that. It depends on availability, on should it be me that goes first, should it be other people that receive the vaccine first. So which one would I pick?
That was to Akiko, because Akiko is very confident about this. Yeah, let's her answer the hard question. Akiko, which one?
I would take any one of them. Because I like I said, they're all been, so far, safety concerns are not there, and efficacy is pretty great for all of them. And 95, 94.5, 90%, these numbers might change as we test more and more people, but they're going to hover around that range. So I don't think there's intrinsically anything that different about the efficacy of these three vaccines.
All right. Let me go to Ibrahim. Ibrahim has two questions for you. So I'm going to go straight to him. It'd be great, team, if you could answer his questions. Here we go.
I want to ask the professionals whether these vaccines can prevent one from getting infected in the first place. And my second question is that why do these companies, these multinational pharmaceutical companies, always rush to African countries or the poor countries during vaccine trials? But at the end of the day, during the vaccines, when the vaccines are developed, like in this time, they always show them like these ones that they have developed, they are going to be used in America first this year in 2020, and they are even projecting 2021 will be in America, Canada, Britain, and some countries. There is no African country they mention.
Let's go with that second point first. Are there any African or developing countries who are likely to get the vaccines first? Krishna, you picked that one up.
Yeah, I do think we are going to see more equitable distribution once some of these candidates become available in a more formal way. Ibrahim is exactly right in that we have a poor history around the world of ensuring equity in the way that we develop, evaluate, and then make available different innovations around the world. I think there have been attempts and new forms of partnerships related to COVID, but also in ensuring that the way that the trials have been conducted includes diverse populations. And I'm hopeful, though I think it may be a bit of time before all countries get access to this vaccine, when it's available, that at least we'll start to see some distribution early on, and hopefully early in 2021 is when we start to see distribution, not just in high-income countries, but also in low and middle-income countries.
And then the second question he had, Akika, I'm going to give you this one. If you take the vaccine, does that mean that you can't get COVID-19?
So how the vaccines are evaluated is such that they're looking for people who are either in the placebo versus the vaccine arm in getting symptomatic infection. So symptomatic plus the virus positive. Whereas whether you will be completely protected from ever getting infected or not is not what they're looking for. And so it's possible that even in the vaccinated, you could get infection, but that does not lead to symptoms or severe disease. So ultimately, what we want to do is to protect as many people as possible from getting sick from this infection. And that's the goal of these vaccines.
Thank you for answering the questions. It was like a speed round of questions. Really appreciate that. We've learned a lot. And speaking of learning a lot, I want to remind you, have a look here on my laptop, the two occasions that we asked Dr. Ahmed Twaj to be on our show. The first time was coronavirus. How can we protect our healthcare heroes? That was in March. You know, when everybody was banging their pots and pans in the UK. And then the second time was in May, when we were just really worried about how are you doing? How are you managing? Because the cases for coronavirus had not necessarily dropped around the world. What have we learned, Ahmed, in all of these months since then, when you were on the front lines? There's one picture that you can actually see your mask, the marks of your mask on your face while you were doing the stream show. What would you say is the most important lesson that we've learned, or you've learned, or your colleagues have learned in the past 8 months or so?
I think in terms of the actual disease, we've been able to learn how to pick up the symptoms like quite quickly. Whereas before, people would come in with like difficulty in breathing, we weren't really sure what's going on. But now we can just pick up without having to wait for the actual COVID result to come back. You can kind of see the pattern that's developed and be like, yep, that one's COVID, that one isn't. And then I think for us, what's really important is to know when to start treatment, and it's always start treatment early. That's with other diseases, sometimes you kind of like, you know, you can wait it out a bit more, but with COVID, it's always start treatment early. And we also know the complications. And for us to learn how to like stop the spread, that's probably, I guess, is the key towards actually improving how we deal with this pandemic. If we're able to stop the spreads, less people are infected. Whether that's preventative medicine through vaccines, but at this moment in time, we don't have the vaccine to use, that we have to look at other ways to stop the spread.
And now we're seeing maybe second, perhaps third waves, and with the northern hemisphere going into winter time, it seems like the cases are spiking. What advice would you give us as a global community, knowing what you know about dealing with COVID-19?
Well, it's the same as what we've been saying for the past year, I guess. It's that this disease is real. It's affecting people. So you need to try to prevent as much as you can. If you need to go out, wear the face mask. There is no reason for you to not wear the face mask. They've done plenty of studies which show it doesn't actually cause suffocation. You can wear it and breathe normally. So it's things like that. And, if you don't have to go out, don't go out. You don't need to pressure yourself or risk contaminating others. But that's, I guess, for us is the best way to understand. And if you have symptoms, stay at home.
Right.
Don't risk it. It might just be the cold. It might just be the flu. It might be nothing that you have and not COVID. But why risk it?
Yeah.
Stay at home and protect those around you.
I want to bring one more person into our conversation. This is Cleo. And Cleo points out the fact that we've been talking about vaccines for a big chunk of this show doesn't mean that COVID-19 will disappear. Here she is.
Although over the past 2 weeks we've seen some excellent news about more than one vaccines being over 90% effective against SARS-CoV-2, this is not sufficient to halt the spread of the disease immediately. Vaccination can only move at the same pace as manufacturing, and we simply don't have enough capacity to produce doses for the entire adult population within 2021. We also do not know if the vaccine is effective at stopping the transmission of the disease. Finally, immunity is built over the course of about 6 weeks from the first dose of the vaccine. This means that it does not matter so much when the first person is vaccinated, but rather when the last person is vaccinated and has built immunity. Until then, we will have to have some control measures in place.
Krishna, that's such a good point. You pointed out how many billions of doses have already been purchased of various vaccines. But in terms of our human behavior, what difference will these vaccines make in the next 6 months or so? What will 2021 begin to look like?
Yeah, I think Cleo is exactly right. And I'd say 2021 will be better than 2020, but that's a pretty low bar. We will not return to normal in the next year or 2 years. And so you're right, vaccines are not going to be the silver bullet that gets us out of this pandemic in the next 6 or 12 months, even if we produced tens of billions of them. So as Ahmed was saying, what we've learned is how to be functional as a society without a vaccine. And countries like New Zealand, like Taiwan and others have shown us that it's feasible to be close to normal if you take appropriate public health measures. And we've also seen in parts of Europe and the US that this can be a horrible disease at an individual and a population level if we don't do those things. So while I'm optimistic about vaccine development over the coming years, I'm also very scared for what we're going to go through over this coming winter. I've just spent the last 2 weeks in the hospital every day taking care of patients. And as Ahmed said, this is very real and we need to take it very seriously. And we can't become complacent just because there may be light at the end of the tunnel.
I want to leave everybody just as a reminder, because we've been quite hopeful talking about vaccines, but I want to leave you with somebody called Eddie Hughes, who we talked to on Al Jazeera a couple of months ago. He's got, it's been known as long haul COVID. Have a listen to him.
For those worst affected, the road back to full health can be a long one. Eddie Hughes survived a month in an induced coma and 17 days on ventilation. Machines kept him alive as his body ceased to function.
Getting better is going to take quite a while. I just need to keep working at it, but it's difficult from a medical point of view as well, because it's difficult to speak to doctors and whatnot, and it's new to them.
We're not out of the woods yet, but thank you so much, Ahmed and Krishna and Akiko, for getting us up to date. What do we know? What should we expect from vaccines, and answering all of the questions? YouTubers, excellent questions as always. And we will continue to do updates and bring you news about COVID-19 and vaccines, as we always do here on the stream. But for now, I'm signing off from the Home Edition studio because COVID-19, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.